clicking here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and move on. So the question is, in California, that Berkeley County, California specifically, are fire protection plans. They have all the exclusion of wildfire. And the Senate conditions were aware of that. That resulted in an increase in the vegetative fuel loading on them. Because without fire regularly returning, things continue to grow and die and deposit on the floor of the forest or the ocean or wherever they are. Without fire returning, there's nothing to clean it up. So it's essentially an accrued liability that carries forward until it comes due in the form of balloon payment on the first possible day. In this landscape, right here, natural fire return interval is 3 to 5 years. Being in a natural balanced state, fire is burning through any particular area in 3 to 5 years. And statewide, as many as 4 million acres burned per year before this area was developed. So in a natural state, there is fire running across the landscape regularly. Those fires, because they were regular and recurring, they were low intensity. They didn't generally climb into the tree canopy, and because there were no homes here, it essentially didn't matter. We read any of these accounts of early explorers, we talk about smoke-filled tracks as a feature of California. When we excluded fire, and we carried forward the accrued liability of increased fuel loading. We've also, at the same time that we increased fuel loading by excluding fire, we built millions of homes in the wildland urban interface, which are I going to that absolutely are wildland urban interface communities. And in doing that, we created an imperative to put out fires. So we recognize that excluding fire is a bad idea. We just don't know how to get out of that trap. Letting the fire going across the state now result in the loss of lives and homes. We created an imperative to put fires out because we have non-adapted, non-resilient, non-fire prepared communities on the same landscape. We also have an increase in vapor pressure deficit associated with climate change. We are moving into a hotter, drier future. A hotter, drier future with compressed rain season. We will have increased exposure to the Haines Index 5 days, or our red flag Diablo wind day, with high winds, low relative humidity, and the potential for explosive fire. Hotter, drier future means this is worse, much worse, before it gets better. And this is not necessarily a climate change problem. Climate change is a contributing factor that accelerates the exposure by the compression of the rain. This is all the factors go into this would be a problem without climate. And then as a result of that, we have increased exposure to the number of extreme weather days. When the rain starts in September or October, we don't have the wildfire risk on all wind days in December. We have a delay in the opposite of rain. You're exposed to more of those fall wind days. They're associated with large scale burn loss. This area, the 19.3 Berkeley Hill fire and the 1991 fire. It's noteworthy that the Thomas fire in Santa Barbara in December. If we get expansion of the fire season, we're supposed to do more of those days. Michigan could reach equal and unequal wildfires. And this is a graph from the Marin Water District, so the water lands on Mount Tam, and it shows a reduction in the number of acres that were burned every year, going back as far as the 1850s when they started keeping. Pretty clear, we have lost a lot of acres as a result of excluding fire, the landscape, as a matter of policy. We see an associated increase in fire return. We mentioned before, you remove fire from the landscape, if you don't replicate that tool with something else, you accumulate fuels that have to be paid off. And at the same time, we built more homes in the wildlands, and particularly in California, we massively increased the number of homes and population density, meaning there are fewer and fewer places where nature can take support because the presence of fire exercises on the right. And here we see the increasing vapor deficit. Long way of saying it's going to be drier and hotter. Drier days, fuels are more desiccated, they're more capable of carrying fire, meaning when there's an ignition and there's some wind on it, the fire is more likely to spread rapidly, escape initial control. So here we see not only have we had an increased number of fires, we've had an increased number of structures burned per acre. So as we are having a larger number of fires, the fires are more destructive as measured by structure. And it's the structure loss component that is why I assume most of you are here, which is causing the impacts and the issues with availability of insurance. When homes are burning, insurers are paying to rebuild homes, and that either drives up rates, an unregulated market, or a regulated market that can cause insurers to not be able to recover their. This is a long way of saying, quick summary here, is that until we lose fewer homes per acre burned, it's not reducing the number of acres burned, it's reducing the number of homes burned. So we reduce the number of homes burned, we don't solve this problem. If anyone has any pushback on that, it's a great time to get that question, because everything else is built upon that foundation. Yes, sir.
So what are the humans about fire?
Because we have more humans in the landscape, and we have the accumulated debt of vegetation. There are more places where there are receptive fuel beds that make a issue for transition being a big. We have a small fire, well-balanced landscape with a couple of acres. I think there's no problem. It is only when the combination of fire, weather, and food come together so that destructive non-beneficial fires. The removal of fire allows the accumulation of fuel. We have more fuels, we have more extreme weather, more of the conditions. Number of conditions. The consequences of those number of conditions that are growing.
What do you mean human response?
The two causes of fire, anthropogenic, for humans that are exposed to the fire, like. There's a couple others as well, but utilities, campfires, candy getting drug down the road, arson, those are all anthropogenic. The primary cause of the fire, lightning, although occasionally, very occasionally, you can have rock falls, sparks, or matches. So there's very few causes of fire, lightning.
You think with PG&E, you guys, you can use the microphone for the recording and for everybody else.
A couple of years ago, PG&E started turning off electricity in rural areas when the winds were very high. And you know better than me, but it seems like we've had less wildfires the last 2 years. Have you seen do you think that's going to decrease the chance of a big wildfire? I mean, there's been jobs on.
No, it's just very important. The lack of fire activity last year is burning weather pattern, which is very important fuels. They didn't burn in those years to a future higher rate. All right, this one.
Question, in this particular fire, does the graph look like this? Because in my corner, actually fires have gone down. Then, about the turn of the millennium, there were many more fires further that people call them. And other factors. But in this, have structured block, is that in fairly flat, or is that, what's that graph?
Well, the fire district, we've lost 5 homes to a wildfire out of 1988. The primary driver, and lost 5, maybe 8 out of the west. But this is at a macro scale, landscape scale, not district by district or city by city. Most of the district trends are all.
My point is, maybe because it looks different in the district. The thing is that if it's not, if the block of houses is not reflected, then should that be adjusted?
No, this isn't intended to be a micro scale, it's a macro scale about the water trends. The fact that there hasn't been a fire in the district probably has more to do with the lack of mitigation on the day of fire was area, rather than any underlying difference in the district versus the broader region.
I don't want to bring this up, but my point is that my point is try to understand the actual risk. And if the risk hasn't gone up, the risk hasn't.
Okay, I understand. But my point would be backward looking historical loss experience for the district has less to do with the risk and more with the probability and the fact that an addition did not occur on the right day at the right spot. Or if it did, that there was a firefighter or a resident who started early, and less to do with the underlying risk. more happenstance than one requirement for the district, which is a very small town.
Interesting.
Your next slide.
I'm Karen Benson, I've lived here for 45 years in Illinois. And I have, been concerned about the exit of Mobile by our citizens. And the condition of the guards, the only ways to get out of Mobile, and involve grants, have not been able to do. One of them is the Buckeye School District, that has a lot of time to speak, because we're in the school. It's one of the only ways to get out of my house before the Catholic school. It's one of the ways. And I would like to know why we have a maintenance on the Catholic school, and what today, the deadline is June 1st. Why did Morocco have to wait to June 1st? They have the fire department and everyone else make up them, maintain the property that has huge dead trees, planted for over a year now. The tall grass around it as we speak. Right next door, the tall grass right along the street. No. I don't know if you can change the date of university and different students. And put in the whole list of the people that live here in the county that have very few actors.
So on topic, I will briefly say, we refer to the deadline, we can't force the deadline, before the deadline, or not the deadline. Moving it earlier than we were, doesn't make a lot of sense, because there's a high probability to regrow. We retreated, fewer acres of that. There's also very, very little regional wildfire risk right now, because everything is well hydrated. The fuels are not estimated to the point that they are available to burn. And I would also say, if you're concerned about the outlying school district, I would recommend voicing your concerns to the outlying school board. The control of the and are elected by a community where as well. I'd be happy to talk to you know, next question. So the way we address the problems we're talking about, or the questions, where there's a series of mitigations that matter. There are some basic things that reduce risk of homes burning. There are large macro scale things, there are lots of landscape, balance and forest health restoration things, but there are some core mitigations that matter that have to do with conditions on and around home that are linked to the survival of homes and therefore survival of communities, around which the science is very clear, both the National Institute of Science and Technology and the Institute of Business and Home Safety, IDHS, and others. There's been a lot of study around this, and they're well understood. It's codified in a number of programs, including the California Department of Insurance's Safer from Wildfire Framework. We'll get into the details of this moment. But as we keep aligning around mitigations that matter, we focus on the core elements that will reduce the probability of structural emission, and we implement those at scale. We can reduce the community's exposure to wildfire risk, and the manner then in which the average annual loss calculations are to show how that risk is converted to price, access, and affordability of insurance. We'll talk in details on that. What is important, however, is to follow the science. I will tell you all frankly, I am regularly told by residents that I'm the best fire chief ever, and then they tell me how to do my job. It's not an area where it is open subject to debate, and science is not my efficacy as a fire chief, it's science. The fire science is very clear, and the studies around the fire science are equally clear, as are the mitigations that disrupt the fire pathway that cause structures to impact. And so there are lots of discussions that we can have about what someone else should do on land that they own, but there's an awful lot of work that can be done on and around the homes, small private homes, that fundamentally reduce our community's risk. And when enacted at scale, can be recognized conceptually at the current moment, we'll get to acquire in a second conceptually, but we understand how those can be recognized and how those can be reflected in access and affordability. And this one's the foot stopper here. There is no future in more firefighters. I'm a firefighter, it's painful to say. But the rapid suppression and exclusion of fire is how we got here. There is no future in California, particularly in this portion of California, that does not involve wildfire, the regular and recurring internal accident. More suppression is carrying forward our accrued deaths. We also can't regulate it. There's lots and lots of discussions, and I will refer to the experts on this, but there's lots of discussions about changing Prop 103 and how insurance is regulated in California. Corrections to regulations are probably very easy, probably very important. The regulatory and the associated pricing changes that come from regulatory changes alone, not the solution, because if we're still using lots of structures, free floating, unregulated insurance, it result in premiums. Okay, so there is no suppressing, regulating, and pricing solution. The solution to this problem lies in fewer homes burning and there are fires. And the solution to fewer homes burning is the adoption and maintenance mitigation to matter on and around homes. And there is absolutely a disconnect currently between conditions on the ground and the pricing of risk. And part of the problem, one of the confounding factors I hear from all the time, I have done these things on my parcel. I am firewise here, fire marshal myself, stood in my driveway, including my property was good. So I think that I shouldn't have a problem with insurance. But the problem is it's used to the macro scale. So how does your parcel look? How do your neighbors look? How do the neighbors' neighbors? How does that block of at least 100 homes that you are situated? What are the conditions aggregate across these? And what are the conditions on the ground next? The tools used today by the insurance industry are very close. That is just a statement of fact. But when I talk to carriers about how we can get them to ingest more detailed, more granular information showing the mitigations that they've done on the ground, they have all that. Show me the neighborhood, the home, the neighborhood, the HOA where everyone has been called to mitigate. And I kind of hang my head and stare at my boots and pick rocks out the door, because I don't have them in the neighborhood. So there's a disconnect between conditions on the ground and the price of risk. I would say part of the strenuous. But until we have carried out a bunch of those mitigations, a bunch of places, we continue with blocks. We don't necessarily want them jumping up and down, so you come to a microscopic review of our community, which you might find there's a lot of things that burn. So there's absolutely a disconnect. And there's time, and there's space to carry out the mitigations that will have value as that disconnect is corrected and as there is less of a disconnect in conditions on the ground and the price of the risk. So how does fire get into our community? There's essentially three pathways. There's the vegetation to vegetation pathway. And so that think of Briones, think of the open spaces, Bollinger and St. Mary. A single island vegetation burning adjacent island vegetation. So horizontally, ground fuels, grass, and brush, three-layer things on the ground, as well as potentially fire rising into the canopy. There's a phenomenon known as a crown fire, which is running treetop to treetop. Highly improbable there to be a crown fire in this environment. That is more of a homogeneous conifer forest in the Great Basin thing. It's really not a phenomenon in the Mediterranean counties. So in a node savanna or big old mix, we're likely to see ground component fire with occasional pre-torching generated embers. This is three-dimensional ember cap that allows fire to jump ahead and causes it to be able to jump a linear meter like a road or a fuel range. So vegetation to vegetation, how a wildland fire comes to our view. The next is the vegetation to structure transition. This is the point where there are vegetative fuels that continuity to the structure. And the structure is not hardened to the degree that it can resist because the ground component or embers that are able to find access to a void space. If you have a 1/4 inch or larger mesh on your vents, embers can gain entry to the void spaces of the home through those vents. They can get established in the walls, the insulation, in the void spaces, the basement, and burn out the attic and burn the house from the inside out. And then lastly, once enough structures start to work, if those structures are within 75 feet eve to eve, there's a high probability that structure A will connect to structure B. So now we have urban conflagration. As I mentioned at the beginning, If we carry out defensible space and home hardening, wildland specific measures, we can reduce the probability of vegetation and structure transition. But if the adjacent structure is growing, we will have exceeded the design parameters of those defensible space and home hardening measures. So if a block of homes start to burn, it does not matter if the adjacent homes are prepared to receive wildfire, because they now have a structure fire that's threatening, increased flood that overwhelms the measures we put in place. So we know how to disrupt this. In the open spaces where there's vegetation fire, a variety of fuel triggers. The district's been involved in creating fuel breaks, they're using prescribed grazing, but recently we've found back on Painted Rock, we're using prescribed fire, Dennis Range, we've been heading that up in the district, getting fire on the ground. We also have hand crews out doing a number of different treatments with private landowners and on public lands. Once we get into 100 feet of a home, we start talking about defensible space. This is the trimming and limbing trees to create an area, the canopy, ground, reducing ground rules, cutting in grass, weeds, by doing first, eliminating juniper and bamboo within 10 feet of a road or a driveway, creating by code, by ordinance for us, 2-foot non-combustible, but by science, 5-foot non-combustible. No kidding, 72 inches next to the home or an attached deck, where there is nothing that will burn, including wooden fence. If there's anything that will burn in that space, the science is very clear, 5 feet in the wall, 7 feet in the there's a good chance that that vegetation or that combustible material will ignite the home. The irony of this, even homes that are well prepared to receive fire in the outlying area, because of sunset language coming for years and years, when you soften the home with plantings next to the house, you can have green grass, you can have gravel, you can have cool hardscape, all of these things that won't burn. But if there is combustible vegetation next to the home, boxwoods, other sort of plantings, embers can fly over the non-combustible features in the yard and in or around that vegetation next to the home, begin to burn and burn the home. You can end up with a beautifully untouched yard, smoldering foundation, because the vegetation was right next to the house, target, is able to propagate fire. Horizontal vertical continuity from a vegetative fuel to the home will overwhelm everything else. And then home hardening, I mentioned before, specifically focusing on retrofitting vents. The district has a grant program. We're happy to give you 1 16-inch stainless steel mesh vent for reimburse the cost of materials, $1,000 for if you chose to do different systems. And replacing if you have a loop sheet roof, that will go, and then a gutter guard program to protect the gutter. The vents are the other than loop sheet roof, the vents are the absolute lowest cost, highest impact retrofit you can make, as well as mentioned under the home hardening category, building to a wooden fence. I know it's big lift to say the wooden fence within 5 feet of the home has to go, replace the gate, but if you think about it, a wooden fence sitting in sun for years and years and years is more receptive to burning than just about anything else in your yard. That has to go to achieve the full value of these treatments. And then lastly, the firefighting. There will always be some residual work. There will always be some gap in fire time. That's what we're going to throw firefighters in. And within 90 minutes in this area, surrounded by the greater Bay Area, you're going to have more firefighters than you know what to do with. Somewhere around the 3 hour mark. There's lots and lots of firefighters. But the homes and the neighborhoods that have to have that defensible space and home hardening, so they're more resilient. So you can get past that initial onslaught of fire without that the first blocks of homes beginning to burn, which leads to a wounded death. Next slide, please. And one more. So what is this all about? So we start with on the target house. We identify moving communities. So at least 100 structures with the SSD is less than 70 feet. Next slide. And we have an interface with that moving community. Now it is exposed to wildland. Next slide, please. And then we have the pathways that lead to it. So this is how it all comes together. Next slide. We have the treatment of them. You fill it out more. One more. And so the structure disrupting the pathways. We start by adopting mitigation matters to make home hardening to prevent the first block of structure from igniting. That also has the effect of disrupting the vegetation. I think it's a twofer there, we'll say some hardening, fine. We understand how fire is going to spread through vegetation, what are the minimum time travels, the NCTs that we're going to fire into the community, cyclists. And we disrupt that with edge mitigation, that being the extended fensible phase, field breaks, flat, other treatments on the landscape, to strike fire, all the things we're doing, both with state funding for our field breaks and in partnership with a large public landowner, public private landowner throughout this. So how all this comes together, Nancy Watkins here from Melman is a co-author of both of these studies. This is the study that they did in Moraga and Lincoln, taking a look at what are the different mitigations, how are they valued, and then how are they aggregated, so we can understand what percentage of mitigation and what percentage of homes we start to have actuarial value. Don't take my word for it, read the study, it's very good. It basically breaks down that you need at least 30% of the homes that get blocked without the mitigations before there's any actuarial value. And climbs to 85% on even more. October of 2022, Nancy and the team also put together a study with some comparison. What they did, if they took a look at the mitigation areas that surround Paradise, Knockout, Yellow, purple and green, these are areas that they recommended putting treatments on the ground, reducing the combustibility of those. This was a look at the average annual loss of Paradise before any mitigations were in effect. And the average annual loss for living and total value is very high on the eastern side of the campfire. And also pretty high on the western side, example for western and uphill fire. So it differentiates the community looking at the average annual loss. I'll leave it to Nancy to answer specific questions. But this say if something red above 5,000 AL, some of these are high at 52,000 is really bad. The red bad, right? Excellent. So with mitigations, with doing treatments in those buffer areas on the community, we found you can see up to a 65% reduction in the average annual loss in some of these areas that have the greatest risk. And then you see it not expressed in dollars for the rest. And the point here was combination of treated buffers around the community, defensible space, and home hardening inside the community to dramatically reduce the risk of wildfire loss, as measured in the AAL, expressed and paraded. So the point being is there is something we can do about this. We need to carry out mitigation at scale, and it's not just work in the landscape around, work in the defensible space and home hardening. But next slide. If we don't do anything, this is the 2040 scenario. It gets much worse. From baseline to 2040, doing nothing is not a great option because all the things we're experiencing now, all the challenges we have are not the risk of wildfire, but the pricing of the risk of wildfire and access to affordability and insurance get much, much worse. Yet with mitigation, we can buy down that risk through pre-fire actions very quickly and very effectively. To me, this study was eye-opening. This is the first time I saw all of this brought together and explain the linkage between treated buffers around the community with receptivity in the form of defensible space and home hardening being converted to an output of dollars. And so a little dirty from a perspective to look at this in dollars, we're talking about homes and lives. I think dollars are a very useful way of looking at it because dollars translate very nicely. It gives us a better sense of how much work needs to be done to achieve what outcome, instead of just saying we need to do more. And this gives us a very clear sense that if we do these things, this is where our risk and the risk is priced. Next slide, please. So with all of that comes together is a comprehensive view of the risk. That's what I've been working on with Nancy Curti. Understanding how far we're coming into our community. There's three pathways to discuss. Well, you can understand not only where those entry points are, the ground components are, what are the end threats likely, the areas we're likely to see high numbers of members who are washed. The presence of the septic field bed will automatically convert to spotlight. The next question is how does any of those entry points with regard to adoption, maintenance, defensive space, and home hardening at the entry points? Because not all parts of the community are created equal. You live In the middle of Moraga, or say next to a golf course in southern Moraga, wildfire threat is coming from the northeast and the southward into it. We do not have the same wildfire risk as say someone who lives on the northwest camp, right up against the grasslands of Lafayette Reservoir. Right? Those are two very different scenarios of wildfire. So understanding the entry points, how resilient homes and the land around them. Right? How many firefighters are available? We know how many firefighters we have available through the area. We know the equipment they have, specific equipment that is better for wildlands, they bulldozers and cancers, equipment that are for truck, type 1, water fire engine, will keep a lot of water. And we understand how long it will take to get there, what the time travel. We know the command relief. So we can articulate from top to bottom where our risk lies, how resilient those points are, and how many firefighters we have with some qualifiers to explain their efficacy. We can articulate a comprehensive view of risk. The missing piece, this is my ask for you. How we're going to the entry points, what have you done to create defensible space on parking and parking? District does a couple 1,000 inspections per year out of 12,500 occupied parcels in the district. And we don't do more because we are stuck at those couple thousand we need to go through doing re-inspection after re-inspection. Juniper within 10 feet of a roadside has been banned since the adoption of the fire code in October 2020, with enforcement date of December 31st, 2023. Not new news. Today, we have 47 open Juniper. People just digging in to do the work, meaning that the group is now back again, at those same 47 Juniper cases, not able to bond to other things. So this is not an issue of the requirement study, this is an issue of requirement action. That issue is needed to have individual parking, create defensible space on parking. So you might have to. All right, so what does that look like on the parks? Number 0 mitigation. Now, I know here that exceeds the current code requirements, which is 2 feet. Sign is crystal clear. 5 feet non-combustible space around every structure. That includes that deck, as part of the structure, includes mulch and fences. Those are absolutely incompatible with fire safety within 5 feet of the structure. Retrofitting the home for specifically vents, so if you have a wood shake roof that is also inconsistent with fire safety, and one of the common factors in large scale fire losses is increased number or large number of wood shake roofs. Roofs together, we maintain 3 of these wheels. You have a Class A non-wood shake roof and it's covered in these wheels, you no longer have a non-combustible roof. You created your own combustible roof. Aiming grass and weeds can be cut to less than 3 inches by 1 beams and 100 feet of a home or 100 feet of a property line. Any juniper within 10 feet of a road or driveway. Any dead trees within 100 feet of structure of the property lines can be removed. And then latitude will be moved to create a 6-foot area out of the chance. There are a few other things having to do with brush, clearing out, breaking up ground. These are the big ones. With an absolute wood sound, non-negotiable. If you want a home that is prepared to receive wildfire, you have to have a full system. Next slide, please. So what that looks like, it's a testing done by IBHS, Rock Island, South Carolina. I went back to some of these tests. This is actually a railroad cruise style thing. This is returning locomotives that day. On the left side here, they have Sierra chips, fresh mold with some boxwoods and wood sided house. The right side here, they have aggregates and gravel. They blow embers at it in 50-mile-an-hour winds for period of time. In 10 minutes, this side of the house. The top line here, this is in Rock Island, South Carolina. 80-something% humidity. Always. Nowhere you come across the thing. We never did that. That's the problem. Fog is in, it's not right. So, and mulch was bought from Home Depot along with the plants that they return the boxes and doesn't come to the seed next day. Very different than boxes that are in your yard since 1970. Well, the fire marshal wins, as I say, that we regularly hear from residents, the juniper thing is 1970, why do I have to do that? And we also hear, I've been here since 1970, I've never had to do this. My answer is I look at the yard and I believe. There's another series of tests done in California. They built a couple of trucks in. On the left side here, they have mulch right, they have broken fence, they have non-combustible material. That's what's there. Next slide. Shortly thereafter, here's the outcome, and this is just what the fan is going on. So the question is our mold, is our roof fences worth this outcome? Or do we want to have this outcome as a community? Next slide, please. So I recently went to the county utility with the California Fire Protection Association, studied this neighborhood. So they had 14,000 homes burned, 115 people died in 3 days of wildfire in February of this year. This block of 80 homes is now wanted to know why. What were they doing with we weren't? So there's a couple of things. Fire made a run up this way, getting carrying it, the embers, whole bunch of homes down and fire made runs up the draw here, and it hit the area on the side here, the residents cleared out 30 feet of landscaping and had an non-combustible wall. The 30 feet of landscaping that they were open space, that they opened it up, was enough to keep the fire out. And a single one of those homes started burning. No firefighting resources there. 10 residents stayed with little backpack homes, 3 gallons, 2.5 gallons of water. And a single one of these homes started burning. Almost happened a couple of places. Fireworks. But it was the community active that created this space and cleared out the zone zero that would have received embers and started to burn. Resulted in that outcome in the midst of horrific destruction at a massive scale. So the statement they made when we were there was we knew help wasn't going to come. There's no one else coming to do this work. So we as a neighborhood, we as a community can no longer be spectators. We had to take action. We believed we had agency. We believed we could reduce our risk to these measures, and they came together every Saturday after the big community event. Right? These are very dense homes. These homes are feet apart. A little different than our community, we're a little more spread out. But that same community action, in our case, executed on the parcel level, create a similar barrier to fire entry is what we need as a community. So I will hold there. I guess we go to questions. If that's a happy answer any questions, I think we hit it. Fair time?
Yes, we'll go ahead and then we can do Q&A. So I hope you found that to be interesting. No. And we'll have those 2 studies that we referenced. We'll have copies on our website. I don't know if you have it on your website, but we'll have those studies. We'll also provide copies of the PowerPoint. Okay, so we'll go with questions. We'll just start over here.
I have a question. The whole party is this, I've seen also before. What I've seen is closing the eaves. I didn't see that. That's important.
Enclosing eaves is important, but really low on the list, because if eaves are unboxed, there's a potential for embers to get caught in there. But if there's nothing to burn, it's a much lower list on priorities. In a perfect world, you would build your house to Chapter 7A, which has a whole bunch of other stuff: non-combustible siding, double pane windows, one of them tempered, Class A assembly of your roof. Very expensive and diminishing returns. And so with a retrofitting eye, the most efficient, lowest or greatest payoff, lowest cost thing you can do is to retrofit your vents, which the district will provide free to residents. So if you want to box your eaves, it won't hurt. I wouldn't start there as your highest priority though.
In terms of moving your property line, if you have an acre of lot, obviously done to do with no, re-racking area, what's the requirement to measure first? To do the entire acreage?
So it depends on the size. If the parcel is 1 acre or less, the entire parcel requires mitigations. If the parcel is greater than an acre, the requirement is 100 feet from the home and 100 feet from the property line. So on an acre, there'd be very little. If you were on 10 acres, you would end up with a perimeter fuel break and a perimeter around the home itself.
And then how about responsibility for easement, maintenance, and acre?
Completely depends on who owns the easement. So PG&E often has an easement underneath their lines where they don't own the land, but they have an easement that includes maintenance. The city and the town, generally speaking, have an easement, but also have an ordinance saying that the maintenance of the land on the easement is the adjacent property owners. So it is very specific to the easement, usually included in the deed. Certainly.
You brought up the reservoir, and what I was wondering is there any communication with East Mud? How is he gonna do anything? Put that in, or what can?
Sure. So from the top, there are East Bay mudlands within the district. The Lafayette Reservoir is not one of those because it's in Lafayette. For the lands within the district, every year East Bay Mud sends us a modification request that we approve their wildfire risk reduction plan for the year. In Lafayette, we have no enforcement authority because it's outside of the district. However, I know they grade the lower and upper fire trails, the perimeter road there. And we've had discussions with them about clearing back a couple hundred feet at the points of transition where the structures are. I don't know the timing on that, but I would also suggest that with East Bay Mud, you have an elected representative. They have a board, elected board, and generally speaking, elected officials are very responsive to their constituents. So voicing concerns directly to them is always a good idea. We continue to work with them, but outside of the district, we don't have any levers.
On the science, you listed two outfits, and what was the one that isn't from the insurance industry?
NIST, the National Institute for Science and Technologies, technical note 2205 is their latest work on structure to structure fire spread.
Also on the side, if you got a wooden deck, is the transition from the deck to the house, is that a risk? I mean, if you get 20 feet around the deck, but then you got a wooden deck still into the house, what's the risk on that one?
So dimensional lumber is very hard to ignite. So dimensional lumber that's maintained doesn't have either leaves or needles, or doesn't have combustive lawn furniture with specifically the cushions or jute doormats are the primary igniters. The actual dimensional lumber is very resistant to fire. If the deck is within 4 feet of the ground, it should be boxed in. So, and underneath it should be cleared of anything that would grow there. Above 4 feet doesn't need to be boxed in, but underneath needs to be cleared. Embers themselves, so with three-dimensional ember cast, there's a very finite number of things that are small and light enough to fly, yet heavy enough to sustain fire over time. And for an ember to spread, it needs to rise vertically in the convective column and then move horizontally with the wind and then fall. So that quickly becomes a great deal of time for the ember to travel any distance, meaning most of the embers burn out, and most of the embers, because they're small, would land on something like a deck and would literally bounce off. There's nothing for them to ignite, right? Trying to light a campfire full of 2x4s with a book of paper matches, just about impossible. Same idea there. It's generally speaking, it's not the deck, it's the things on, around, or under the deck. And the deck, which is attached to the home, is technically an appurtenance, meaning the 5 foot of clearance extends from the deck. So
5 feet, the deck for an idiot.
yeah, dimensional lumber decks are very hard to ignite. Certainly.
Chief, when questions are asked, we'll do our best to keep them so everybody can hear the question. So let's keep that in mind.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm sadly, I think you're retiring, but thank you for your time, and you've been wonderful. So I live on School Street, and obviously it's no secret that there's a lot of development, and a lot of it is centered around the School Street neighborhood. I've been looking at the new developments that are proposed, and of course I have some concerns that I don't see fire apparatus access that I would expect, or the aerial access of course with the structures, and I live very close to something that's not going to be quite the thing. And so what I'm trying to understand is what is the fire district's involvement in ensuring that the current fire ordinances are enforced with respect to new development? And what role does the citizen have in the ability to chime in and ask questions?
So the fire marshal's right here. And so what we do with new development is we review it to ensure it's compliant with the fire code, specifically in that case, Annex D, which is fire apparatus access. Aerial access is
30 feet.
you can take this, Jeff. So Jeff reviews those as the takeaway. There's not a public input process for fire code review because it's the fire code. But Jeff can speak to aerial apparatus access and fire apparatus access, both of which were topics of discussion with those developments because of their height.
Good evening, everybody, Jeff Isaac from your fire marshal. So to your question specifically, when these projects come up, we work with town staff and we do preliminary design. We meet with the developer, we go through the fire code. Here's a list of requirements: aerial apparatus, fire hydrants, water locations, everywhere we're gonna need to be, evacuation routes, widths of stairway, all that is addressed in that pre-design review. So the aerial apparatus access has to be 36 feet. If you cannot meet 36 feet, with some of our proposed buildings aren't gonna be able to meet, they're gonna change the construction type. Push additional sprinklers, not just in hallways and living spaces, but also in the attics. So we're gonna build that structure to buy additional time for firefighters out of the building and not be able to use that area.
And I should, just to clarify, when we're talking about evacuation, we're talking about interior corridors, not vehicle evacuation.
No, understood, and I guess I'm thinking of the resident who lives down the street from now this large building. Actually, at this point, several large proposed building. You know, interior sprinklers, great, totally appreciate that. I want to make sure the soul of the building is safe as it's around the building. But will the fire code be enforced? I mean, are we gonna actually see, or are folks gonna sacrifice the fire code because of what seems to be a relaxing now of standards and?
There's no relaxing. I mean, based on the number of angry people on my voicemail, we are not relaxing the fire code. I just say, we joke about, we state in fact, the fire code is a minimum requirement, not the beginning of the negotiation.
And has some this and into this property development, does that happen with public sector or does it happen after?
We review plans when they're submitted. I don't know where they are within the broader structure. And I should be clear, from our perspective, you either met the fire code or you didn't. If you didn't meet the fire code, then in the case of aerial apparatus access, sometimes that's to allow some trees to be planted, some things that have some beneficial community things. So to Jeff's point, we require additional sprinklers, we require fire rated construction, we require additional fire rated stairwells with standpipes so that we achieve the same practical effect. But we have zero incentive to deviate from the fire code, and it's really easy to read. So we would have to answer for any deviation. So we just don't.
Thank you.
Certainly.
My question is, for you. Well, maybe Chief in here. I had doubted about wrapping my vents in the net, and you have told me nobody looks at your vents once they're done. And I did wrap my vents, and I never look at my vents and think about, oh, that's beautiful. So thank you for that. I would say one of the issues I haven't dealt with is the wooden fence that comes to either side of my home. And I have a kind of a big brush bush right up on that fence. And I haven't dealt with it, and I'm hoping to, but one thing that makes me sad to see is that we still have new fences going in today, and I see people get the new fence and have, they will have to be dealing with the same problem I am, because we're still attaching our wooden fences, new construction, new fences to homes. And isn't there a way to change our code or something for new homes so that this problem doesn't grow?
Did someone pay you to ask that question, sir? So this has been a, well, we should talk afterwards, small unmarked bills. So fences are technically a type U occupancy. They're regulated by the building code. So as the fire code official, I get to enforce the fire code that the MOFD board has adopted. I don't get to modify the building code. However, the building code official, which is the city and the town, have the ability to amend the requirements for U occupancies, fences, in wildfire or wildland urban interface fire areas and very high fire hazard severity zones, which is all the community, and could, through an amendment of the building code, ban the use of wood fences entirely or within zone 0. However, that's the building code, and unfortunately, it's not my book. But I agree, it's a great deal of frustration that we go through all this level to require someone to build 7A with exterior under reef sprinklers, and we then let them put in a thin redwood fence that'll sit there and cure in the sun for 15 years.
Yeah, we could publicize it in some way so people to the alternatives, which aren't super easy, but these are the wrought iron fence and. You know, everybody wants their privacy, but we'll get used to a new paradigm in that, but yeah.
And I'm happy to put that on the follow-up list from this meeting, so we can sit down and talk about that possibility with respect to the building code. And also we can find out if any other municipalities have made that switch. That would be helpful. So, thank you for the good question.
Okay. Could you please explain the trees overhanging the roadway and driveways?
Absolutely. So the code requirement is 15 feet vertical clearance. That has more to do with our ability to drive an engine unobstructed without hitting anything. I get a lot of questions right as you come past Delray School and you're going up Moraga Way, whether it's the overhanging trees. Those are oaks, they're not going to burn. So from a fire safety standpoint, the fact that the canopy on those well-maintained limbed up trees happens to touch over the road is irrelevant to fire spread. The issue with trees overhanging the road has more to do with access. If you see the tree that has been struck by the UPS truck or the Amazon van every day, that tree needs to go. Because what that tree is doing is effectively reducing the roadway width so that a fire engine, which is gigantic, is now being pushed to the middle of the road to avoid hitting the tree. And if you start counting the lug nuts, the fire engine is going to win. So now we have a problem if we're trying to evacuate residents and bring firefighting resources in at the same time. But the code requirement is from the edge of the paved surface, paved driving surface, 15 feet vertically must be maintained clear at all times.
Over the sidewalk, okay,
Yes,
and then the driveway,
driveways are the same, technically the same requirement, but our enforcement drops off there mostly from a prioritization standpoint. That overhanging the driveway is much less of an issue unless it's a very long driveway, where we would have to be driving up it for either an EMS or just a regular response outside of well. Certainly. Oh, right next to you.
So a redwood fence is not the same as a redwood deck.
Correct. Because a redwood deck generally is dimensional 2x lumber, 1.75" nominal thickness, where a fence is usually 5/8. It's just much thinner. It also, the fence, generally speaking, is going to terminate into something that'll burn, like brush or mulch or grass or something, where it's much easier to clear around the deck. If you had a wooden fence and you cleared everything around it just like it was a home, 5 feet either side, the fence would have a much lower probability of burn. Unfortunately, that's not typically the case. And there, once again, this technical note 2205, lots of case studies of fences carrying fires to homes. So everything else was maintained and in good shape, but the fence was the wick that brought fire to the home. And then usually that fence is attached to the home. And then fire has got its pathway into the void spaces.
explain why, some of the years are requiring earthquake retrofitting for fire insurance.
Do you know?
I haven't heard of that before. So I'm sorry, can you be more specific about what kind of retrofitting they're requiring? Those LE, plants that will inform the house, that's one thing, into the foundation. Has to get properly, because there's nothing to do with earthquake.
I think, homeowners do things for fire following your. So while they won't refer you for earthquake damage, unless you have earthquake care coverage, they do ensure if your home were to catch fire after an earthquake. So they don't want it, some instability that would lead to the likelihood of fire.
So, I'm gonna go with Joel's answer.
Green is go.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel. So I can ask you the question, and that is why some insurers would require, earthquake retrofitting for property insurance coverage. And Joel gave, thank you, the answer that doesn't make sense to me. I hadn't heard it before, which is that because fire following earthquake is a coverage, and that's a separate kind of peril from wildfire, but some of the home hardening things might crop over. So that's a possible answer for why your insurer might have been required.
Yeah, please.
And point of clarification on the defense. So. You have. It's not the percentage of-
Yeah, put it close.
on the other side of the- That-
With regard to the fence in proximity to the home. Yeah. Right.
And this will be.
Right, so the question having to do with which part of the fence and where, if the fence, any part of it, perpendicular or horizontal to the house, if it is, touching the home or within 5 feet of the home or an attached deck or overhanging, then it should not be made of combustible material. And really the issue comes down to, there are a million permutations and there are plenty of smart people in here that could hack a way to have combustible vegetation and decks and fences and things and set them up in a manner that the house wasn't going to burn. There are ways you could hack this. The question with regard to scale and enforcement and verification is one of standards. So the standard is if there is anything that will burn within 5 feet of the house, there's a higher probability of the house burning. An analog to this is we're asked all the time, what about this specific item of vegetation? And if you're a member of the garden club, and you know a bunch of Latin names of plants, you know more than I do, you win. But the fact that these plants are less likely to burn is irrelevant because they're still plants. They're still organic material, the woody component, whether they're well hydrated or dried out. There's still things that could burn within 5 feet of the house. And therefore they fall into the category of things that shouldn't be there. So with regard to your fence, if from the house measured 5 feet out, the fence is in that area, it should be replaced with a non-combustible fence, a metal fence or something else in its place. That makes sense. It's not a requirement. That's a building code thing. I can't enforce that. That's the science though. So from a code and for a fire code, the part of the piece that I can enforce, I have no authority over fences. With regard, except for, we added one for those fences made out of oak litter that people are stuffing between pieces of chicken wire. There's 3 of them in Orinda. They drive me nuts every day when I go by them. But other than those, with the wooden fence, that's outside the fire code, that's in the building code. The science says there shouldn't be anything within 5 feet of the house.
So we speculated as well. And for our meeting here today. What percentage in our county of homes that have been on fire or internally flooded versus those externally?
Countywide, I don't know.
Should we have that kind of data?
I don't understand the relevance.
What?
I don't understand the relevance of the distinction.
Where the frequency is, where the most attention should be paid. That's correct.
Okay, yes, sir. We have many more structure fires from interior ignitions that do not spread to adjacent structures than we do vegetation cause losses, because we've had almost no vegetation cause structure losses in this county in many years.
If I
can interject. Can you repeat? You should repeat that, 'cause that's an important point.
Okay, so sorry, the question was, what percentage of structures are lost due to an interior structure fire versus an external vegetation fire? I don't know the number. However, the vast majority of structure fire losses are interior ignitions from inside the habitable compartments, because we've had very few wildland losses in this county, most notably the tennis club in Lafayette. But other than that, there's the occasional outbuilding in East County. We have not seen large-scale losses in this region, much less this county, of structures since the 91 tunnel fire.
Also, to whom was this notice sent on me here today? I got it from a neighbor. I didn't get one from the other. Why was that?
It's a question for the town. This is intervent.
Can you repeat that?
Well, to whom was this notice for the meeting sent? And mom, I didn't even get a copy, even my neighbors didn't.
I can answer that, and the reason for tonight's meeting between the fire district and the town, we've been getting lots of requests for meetings dealing with many of the subjects you're hearing about, as well as educational sessions and so on. The fire and safety council meeting, etc. So we decided to have this meeting with no specific agenda other than fire safety community meeting. So we we sent that out through different electronic networks, the Broad System Network, the town website, in our network, the fire districts network, went to businesses and made them out there. I'm sorry if some people didn't get them, but this is just the first discussion, and if we need to, we can do more. This is just a step. Okay,
Thank you.
we can always do better.
Hi, this is my turn here. We saw maps and reports that you referenced on the screen there indicating success. Are there any maps and reports showing the success that we've had here in the last year or so when many of us have invested a lot of money in securing property and define what the fire department's orders? Do you have any data showing how much risk of wildfire has been lowered in our community?
So I should emphasize the maps, those were studies, they were case studies, and they were theoretical reductions of risk. Paradise has not created 45,000 acres of buffered land around the community. It was a study showing if they did, what the result would be. In the fire district, we have maps. We know where the fuel breaks have been completed. We know where large property owners have completed the work that we require for undeveloped parcels, and we know where we have conducted inspections to MOFD Ordinance 2303, which is our exterior hazard abatement ordinance for homes, and 2308 for perimeter fuel breaks. Notably, 2303 does not include a 5-foot non-combustible zone. So we are enforcing our ordinance, which reduces risk. Absolutely. It doesn't reduce risk to the level, i.e. a full zone 0, that the risk transfer industries, the insurance industry and NIST have identified is the threshold at which they start to recognize a reduction. So we have done a lot of work and we have reduced risk, but the standards that the risk transfer industry are using to gauge value and whether or not we have done enough, but we don't have the requirements that meet the science as accepted by the risk transfer industry.
Would it be fair to say that it's impossible for us to reach those standards?
Oh, not at all. No, we have the authority under PRC 4117 and Government Code 51182, supported by a finding of fact, to adopt more restrictive measures than state minimums that could meet the science. And then, of course, it would be a matter of enforcement. Woodside has adopted a zone 0 on April 30th. They haven't started enforcing yet. When they start enforcing, I suspect that some of the consensus around adopting it will start to fade. I can't overemphasize enough. We start on the 1st, we will start our annual inspection process. And the phones will start ringing off the hook with people demanding to know why we're requiring this to be done. And that's to the current standard. So we have the ability, and what I don't think we have is the community will, to create a 5-foot non-combustible zone around most of our homes.
I'd like to add to what they said from the perspective of the insurance industry, because I'm thinking about what you're thinking about and that's hi everybody, I'm your neighbor, Nancy from Lincoln. We have not had a clear zone 0 either. We have a cocktail minute garden house with shingles, so I'm not the poster child for fire safety. So we're working on. What I will say is the insurance industry thought of wildfire as something that could happen once in a while, but was not a huge problem up until about 2016. So the whole, in California, the whole thing changed after 2017 and 2018. And so all of the things that are needed, understand urban conflagration, which is different really than wildfire. Wildfire has been a lot of, urban conflagration is when a lot of them were like Paradise, like behind, and like Orinda could, and like Aurora could. So the reason that you and I are having trouble getting insurance is that it's taken a while for us all to figure out, and we're not done, we're not anywhere near done, to figure out how to bridge the gap between what you're talking about, what you're doing, what Dave tells you he wants you to do, and maybe you will do it if you have a better understanding of why, and you feel like you get insurance at the end of the time. So what Dave and I have been working on with others is building all of the things that have to happen to bridge the gap between you changed out your fence, you put, timber screens around the house, you got rid of the burnable things within 5 feet of your house. Now you should be able to get insurance, like that's what you would expect, right? But as Dave pointed out, maybe your neighbors didn't, and if all of your neighbors are very high risk, your house is also high risk, even if you did everything right. So we are having to rethink how information, gets aggregated up, not just you, but the area around you, and how you can look at your neighborhood and the area around it and to know if as a group, as a community, you've done what needs to be done. And the insurance industry should be looking at the same information. We understand that the risk is difficult to quantify, but one of the major reasons that it's hard to quantify is that the facts are not known about what you did and what you didn't do, and what your neighbors did and what they didn't do. And one of the reasons is because vegetation is a big piece of it, and vegetation changes all the time. Like the weeds that you whacked in, on May 31st, so you made your June 1 deadline, they could have grown back by October. And even if you kept them clear in 2020, they could be back up again in 2021. So inspections have to be done continuously for the information to be reliable. But right now, to have a person come and look at your house costs over $100. And so insurance companies are not doing that every time they quote a renewal policy. They're certainly not looking at your house and all the houses on your street to see if you all have clear zone zero. So what we're working on together, Dave and I, and others, is a sequence of different initiatives. One being about this data that I'm talking about, like parcel level mitigation, community level mitigation, if you did shaded fuel breaks, if you did, created a dog park on the side of town to be a buffer zone if the winds are coming. Any of those things that you do, it may be a pretty long time, or maybe never, that the insurance company's information is updated. So we're trying to put a database together, not only in California, but in other places in the West, where that information can be consistently maintained. And yes, we have the community, we have the insurance industry. That's just the first step. It's going to be hard, but I definitely think it's doable, and we've already done a pilot project with support from IBHS, the insurance industry's science institute that they mentioned before. We are working to do the second phase. We've got 4 of the top California insurance companies representing about 25% market share who said they would support it. So we're trying to build it. It's not just an idea now, it's something that is getting done. But there's the delay in recognizing the risk has put us to a point where the insurance industry has lost a lot of money in California, and they're somewhat afraid of the wildfire risk because it costs them so much money. And so they have to feel that they can manage and measure the risk, and they have to be able to price the risk at what they consider to be the right price to represent what risk they're taking on. And if those things are fulfilled, the insurance market will come back. That doesn't mean your premiums will be lower than they used to. They may be lower if the risk goes down, but at least if you have competition, that will drive premiums by its very nature. Because competition means choice, and some of the choices are going to be lower cost. So I just wanted to try to set the stage for what the insurance problem is, and I'm sure there's lots of other questions about that, but I will say that what you're recognizing, the frustration that you're feeling is something that we've been working on for a couple of years, and I do think that there's a path forward.
Can I ask you a question? I understand that the insurance companies are using modeling to determine future risk. Is it possible that some of these models could incorporate mitigation? So that maybe what we're doing we get some credit for it? In the near future?
Such an awesome question, thank you, and I'll look at it. If I've been instructed yet. So, the gentleman's question is, these catastrophe models that insurance companies use to measure and manage wildfire risk, is it possible that they can see mitigation? The answer is yes. Yes, with an asterisk. So, if you ask an actuary anything, you're not gonna ever get, just hang it up if you want that, you want to do that. But, the two studies that Dave, mentioned, the whole point of them was to show how to use a catastrophe model to measure mitigation. It wasn't to give you the answer, it was to show how to do it, because right now, actuarial science and the models had not evolved very far. When Dave was talking about crude fuels, well, it's a little bit pejorative, not exactly. Put it this way, the models are so much better than what they're replacing, which is just looking at history. If you just look at history, you are not capturing the risk at all. It's tempting and it's human nature to say, if no homes in my community have burned down, then we don't have any risk. But to the insurance industry, if you live in a minefield and you haven't stepped on one, that doesn't mean that it's okay to run around in the yard. And so they see where we are as very high risk. The models are the very best tools for them to be able to understand what's the effect of weather and ignitions, and they do measure changes in emissions over time. They do measure changes in and fuel outside of the community. They do capture changes in the vapor pressure that is. They also show how changes in building stock. When we do more houses into the movie, that increases risk. When we harden our homes, that decreases risk. They have some ability to reflect that. They're also not advanced as they need to be to get to the community transfer of wildfire. That's the place where they're the most crude, and these modelers have a lot invested to get better. But like I said, the last 7 years, since 2017, urban conflagration has been a huge deal. The risk and the perception of the risk have changed very rapidly, and the need to understand it has gone way up. The fire professionals that I've talked to over the last couple of years as I've been working on this have told me in my entire career, I've never seen anything like, like the time since 2017. So it's not just the insurance industry, it's not just the CAT model, it's all of us. We're all dealing with something we haven't encountered. So the models are the best tool to do as is scenario testing, where you can't just look at history and say, well, Paradise had the same campfire going through, but a third of the houses had been mitigated and the others weren't. There's no scientific way to just look at the numbers and say, well, this is what would have been the outcome. The models are how you do that. You re-simulate the event, you change the housing stock, and then you change the damage estimates based on how the different vulnerabilities have changed because of mitigation. So that's the reason that you have catastrophe models, and so, or one of the main reasons. But the data to feed the models, which is the first thing that I was talking about, is not widely available. We don't know the state of mitigation of every house in Paradise before the fire. So it would be better to know now, pre-fire, like what the houses had around them. And then if there are fires in different areas, the insurance industry will be able to use that information and the science, NIST and IHS to improve the models. Okay, I don't know.
If I could just, one point though, Nancy and I have sat across the table from the modelers and said, if this information was available, conditions on and around the homes, would you use it? And the answer was a resounding, we would use it if it was verified and it was refreshed. So I'm confident that the market will bring those solutions to bear. We're doing a lot of work to accelerate that. And the point of my talk and my emphasis on defensible space and home hardening is when those tools come online, as they inevitably will in the near future, it would be a much better outcome if we had good news to report. Defensible space and home hardening at scale, that the models will show a reduction in average annual loss so that a community can be in or adjacent to a wildfire perimeter without a high probability of ignition. That to me is where we need to get, and that's going to take a lot more time. And from where I sit, getting the work done on the ground at scale is going to be much harder than building the tech solutions and the data pipe to allow that information to be ingested by models, because it's slow go. And that's the part we all have agency over. It also has an ancillary benefit that in addition to the inclusion in insurance pricing, it reduces the probability of our homes in our community burning. So it's good either way. In time, I'm confident it'll be ingested into models, and we want to be ahead of that curve.
We're gonna try to go to people who haven't asked questions, okay?
Well,
Nancy, thank you first of all for coming out and looking at your neighborhood. And felt part of it. I'm sure. And I apologize, I don't know.
Is your mic on?
I can hear them.
Now, you know, you're on.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Nancy, thank you for coming. I'm sorry, I don't know the specifics, but I understand that at least Moraga was recently downgraded or upgraded in its rating of fire risk in the community. I believe we were high risk and now we are considered very high risk. I don't know if it's CDF or if this was another organization, but there was some thought and hope that being higher risk would allow us to regulate growth to some extent. That is possible. But the chief is shaking his head. He doesn't seem to know.
no, well, I do, but so the CAL FIRE FRAP recently reduced the state responsibility area high fire hazard severity zone update in April. And that included the lands outside of the municipal boundaries of Moraga and Orinda. So Canyon, specifically parts of Bollinger. And we saw some significant upgrades in areas that in the 2009 maps were classified as high, being now classified as very high. There is an associated LRA, local responsibility area map update that will be released at some point. Since 2019, we've been hearing 6 months. So at some point, the LRA update will be out, and that will include Moraga and Orinda. It is reasonable to assume there will be areas that are upgraded to very high that were previously unrated, and there's a whole new category in LRA of high that previously was suppressed. So there will be significant changes in the map, but those maps have not been published. The updates for LRA, the current ones date published in 09, draft in 07. So there has been no change with regard, and there's no community rating. It's by specific areas, and there's a lot of differentiation between a community. We are included on the communities of risk, the WUI list, but that dates to 2001, and that includes San Francisco. So that's a very, very close instrument. And then we have, obviously, we declared a wildland urban interface fire area in portions of the community by ordinance supported by a finding fact, but that only applies to the application of more restrictive elements of the building code in chapter 70.
And just to emphasize, those maps are classifying hazard issues where fire is likely to occur. And that's not the same thing as vulnerability, which is what happens if a fire is occurring in this period. How vulnerable are we? That's the part we have control. So we, the insurance industry uses similar information because the people generate this map, but they don't get a lot of students based on that. That's going to get outdated. They don't have all the information that the insurance industry. So we take that with what we did in that.
Well, that's the story. Who brought up this re-rating
For what purpose?
Well, the legislator directed the director, CAL FIRE director, to update those maps every 5 years. The last ones were published in 2009, right? But it's a legislative mandate, and those maps are strictly for land use planning, which with having to do with single non-circulatory routes of travel and whether 7A applies. That's the purpose of the maps.
We have a question. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was fantastic. I grew up actually on the East Coast on the very beginning, in Northwest Hilly. And so, on Red Flag, days is actually quite, nerve-wracking to go to see. So I'm curious, this is what actually, can you describe the activities that the program does on Red Flag days, specifically like at nighttime, when people aren't, actively and looking for, activity, and then also kind of how you've mapped out like the access points to various neighborhoods and up windy or winding streets so that because I know it would be next when we get a shot of some of the kind of around the corners of some of them around the
Yeah, so the question I do with what we do for red flag and what we do specifically for access and outlying areas. So red flag days are declared by the National Weather Service regionally. We upstaff additional units. We put either task forces or strike teams, so 5 engines with a battalion chief in service that are then available throughout the county. When we had the Merrill Circle fire in Moraga on a red flag night, we had one of those strike teams stood up in each of the East Bay counties and all of them came to our fire. So we have extra resources available and on the street and available on a regional basis. We flow resources seamlessly back and forth across boundaries, but on a red flag night, when a lot of things are going on, you can be a little reticent to let your resources go to someone else's fire. So these free floating additional resources significantly increase the initial weight of attack. We also, through a number of initiatives and projects, we have the Alert California Wildfire Network, where we have cameras essentially on all of the pieces of high ground. Our partners in Lafayette PD were the lead on installing, I think we have 7, Dennis is here. We have 7 cameras in the Moraga Orinda area, strategically located on hilltops. There are a couple of AI computer vision based applications that are now running against those that are monitoring them 24 hours a day. Interestingly, they're more effective at night because a fire produces smoke and then the light from the fire is reflected on the smoke and you're not confusing it for a cloud, which fire during the day can be. So they're very, very effective at night and that results in near instantaneous notification with regard to a fire start. And then for access, a truck is the thing with the aerial on the top. We don't use those for wildland. An engine, specifically a wildland engine, either a type 3 or type 6, can get to, I'm not aware of anywhere in the district the type 6 can't get. It's just it's an F-550 dually. So it's basically a big pickup truck. So we have the ability to get engines essentially everywhere. And the district is well mapped with regard to access because we have to get everywhere for fire and EMS on a regular basis. So it's not specific to wildland. And then we have regional interoperability and access plans for the fire trails. So the dirt roads that run through the surrounding areas that we grade this time of year, we run a grader across them to have good access. And then lastly, we have access to a number of aerial firefighting resources. Specifically, CAL FIRE now has a Firehawk, a Black Hawk based, much larger helicopter running out of the Alma Helibase in San Jose, which sounds far away unless you're in a helicopter doing 200 something knots and it's here in about 8 minutes. So we have an aerial component to firefighting and those rotary wing helicopters can now operate at night, which is a new capability. So I agree, it is nerve-wracking on a red flag night when it is windy and you're worried about waking up to the smell of smoke, and you should be. We'd encourage everyone to be signed up for the community warning system. Make sure you have battery backups if you're using an area with poor cell service where you're using your router and Wi-Fi where you need to have some power on that in case there's a PSPS, and then have to a neighborhood system so that if a resident in a neighborhood receives an evacuation order or warning, they can notify their neighbors on the way out, which we certainly saw in the Merrill Circle environment where it's poor cell coverage, it's a PSPS, and people were honking on horns and pounding on doors. That was one of the primary ways the initial alert was spread to residents as the engines were, and then some people were woken up by the sound of sirens as an engine went by. So having a neighborhood plan is really useful. And then lastly, I would say, at the neighborhood level, knowing if you have any neighbors who have access functional needs, might not be able to drive, in essentially every evacuation I have ever seen, every car has at least one empty seat. And that seat could be filled with a resident who would need help, because it is very, very challenging for our partners in law enforcement or for fire to get resources into an area to assist in evacuation. We're trying to get resources in there to fight fire and to do all the other functions we have. And so if residents are able to self-evacuate themselves and their neighbors who have need, that is really helpful for freeing up resources that otherwise be taken away from the firefight. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so I have two questions. One is with SB9, properties produced at half, and then with a separate ADU on each one, it's in quarters, so you can take acre lot, and suddenly you have a quarter acre parcels. What's the NYPD view of increasing the number of structures in a higher severity zone? That's the first question. The second question was, I have box schemes with full 3/16 volts. Should I get to 1/8 or just 3/16?
1/8 or finer. We use 1/16, but 1/8 is the standard for preventing ember intrusion. So I think it was a slip of the tongue. You mentioned high fire hazard severity zones. SB9 lot splits are not allowed in very high fire hazard severity zones. However, there are no high fire hazard severity zones in LRA currently until the new maps come out. So from the fire district perspective, we enforce state law, state fire safe minimums and MOFD ordinances. We don't opine beyond that. The law says you can do lot splits and you can do ADUs with ministerial approval, which is a building code, a fire code thing. So we follow the law. We don't have an opinion beyond that.
So, thank you for this tonight. I think when you started to talk about evacuation, I wondered if you had any updates on evacuation of the fire team.
Good evening, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm going to be here with you. One of the things that we did in the fire district, and it actually has gone into effect just before the Merrill fire, is we were the beta project for what was known as zone haven, now known as Genesis, where we had divided our town up into evacuation zones. And what that allows us to do and allowed us to do for the Merrill fire was target that particular area with evacuation orders. Now, the problem was, is as the chief said, we were in the middle of, I think, our first PSPS. Sanders Ranch has terrible cell coverage, which we're fixing, that sector. And so it was not quite as successful as we had hoped. The nice thing was that at the time, my junior patrol officer was working, got notified by the fire chief he needed the order of evacuation. He was able to go to the zone map in his trunk, make one phone call, and within 5 minutes, that evacuation order was being transmitted. As opposed to 2016, when we had the sinkhole that took out the Orange gas line at Green and Ronald Road, Green Center. That took us over 20 minutes to work with our dispatch center to literally draw a circle and then make those reverse 911 calls. So that, even in infancy, was a tremendous improvement over what we had to do. So that is, we will use that system. You may have seen the NICSO go out earlier this evening talking about how to sign up for CWS. There are brochures at the back counter there, and also advising people what the Genesis or the formerly zone haven product looks like. So you can actually go online to that program and look at the evacuation zones in town. You remember, it was 2 years ago, we sent a postcard to each individual resident in town, advising people what their evacuation zone was, and again, how to sign up for the CWS. Most of you are probably tired of hearing me say it, but I'll keep saying it until we get every single person in the town signed up, which means I'm going to continue to keep saying it. One of the things that we did in the aftermath of the Merrill fire is we worked with Verizon and the Sanders Ranch HOA to establish a cell site. And I'm excited that should be constructed this summer and be in place, covering
that whole southern area of the town. And it's taken a long time, COVID didn't help matters, but that's a fantastic thing. We also have, Verizon put in another one on Green, AT&T has since put one out above St. Mary. So our cell coverage in town for those times is better. Also, the cell companies are required by the PUC to provide at least 72 hours of backup power at every cell site. So if we do have a PSC, that they're going to stay on. If you remember the first couple that we did, our cell site died too. So, and we were just so we are continually working with the fire department to home these things. We've actually we've amended our evacuation zone twice, they're pretty solid now, because as we looked at them and we looked at where the lines were and a couple of cases we were dividing neighborhoods, and so we fixed those. And the nice thing about those is they're not only fire, but we've also used them for law enforcement incidents and other issues too. So they are a very effective way, because if you think about it, I don't want to use nickel that goes out community-wide and touches 20,000 people to order an evacuation of one area of town, because I don't need everybody else self-evacuating and clogging the road, so I can't get the people out who I need to get. So that's why that specific detailed system of just addressing that particular area is critically important. And I want to actually thank the fire chief, because it was his lead, and that Dennis Rain, our emergency preparedness coordinator, to pull that beta project into our district. And unfortunately or fortunately, we didn't agree to test early on.
So will the smart city project?
And how do we do that? And those of you, in the last year, we received an earmark from Congress from the Sol meeting to fund what's called a smart signal project. So what that means is the public works departments of the three long-run cities are currently working together, and all of our traffic signals will be linked through a computer system, so that in the case of an emergency, we will be able to control the signals at once. So think, we've got to evacuate a big piece of town, and we need to push people out the wrong way. We will have the ability to take those signals, turn them all green, and keep them all green outbound to expedite traffic. Same thing we could do on Moraga Road, going out of town downhill, if that was the viable alternative. So that will give us the ability, and not only in our town, but also in Orinda and in Lafayette for small scale issues there too. So that is something that is in progress, and we've also discussed some other ideas to dangle in front of the Congress with people looking for something else. Yeah, the public safety power cutoff, we've all been through it from PG&E. They're pretty good at their noticing ability has gotten better. We at the beginning, in fact, there's a meeting coming up now with all the public safety agencies working with PG&E. We'll be talking with them about how they implement those. Hopefully we'll see a little reduction in this year. We'll see, because ideally we can keep our community levels up a little bit.
And then also the thing, in addition to the smart signal project for the three municipalities, we're also doing a long run of evacuation study. We're working on getting a grant. We had a meeting, we elected officials from the three municipalities met on May 6th, and the two cities in the town model working very well together and working on evacuation studying together. So you'll hear more about that in the coming months.
So thank you for that. You actually answered my first question about whether there was any studies that were planned or ongoing studies for evacuation. I did have one more question though. Are the studies that are planned or that are ongoing, it sounds like they're planned or in the works, is there going to be any analysis done with respect to the state's housing mandates, which I understand from Moraga will add between now and 2030, I think 1,000 or 1,100 units at minimum, as required by the state mandates. Is the town looking, or are the municipalities looking at that specifically with all of the development that's being required by the state and how that will impact the evacuations?
So the question is, will the three municipalities look at the ability to accommodate an evacuation if we go to a full build out with the new state housing requirements? And for the town of Moraga, we have to build, I believe it's, or accommodate zoning for 1,118 or say 1,200 homes at the worst. So yes, the modeling will have to look at the capacity of the road system to accommodate the necessary vehicles. But again, it's a dynamic modeling. It's kind of a sensitive subject, but it depends on the type of scenario that we're facing. And when you think about evacuation order for all residents to get out, that's very unlikely. So we have to look at the different scenarios. There will be cases where it makes the most sense to shelter in place, but it depends. There's no simple solution or model. In Moraga, you won't be a map that we have that says if there is a fire, go this way. We're not going to do that because we don't know. It'll be based on the incident. So we hear what the gentleman is saying. If we do the build out, what will the impact be on the ability to evacuate? Does that help?
That's exactly, I just wanted to know if it sounds like you're thinking about that.
We think about it every day, sir.
Yeah, it's just a really big issue, I think, that maybe not everyone's familiar with.
Yeah, we know about July 4th and fireworks. Right? That's the worst case. When everybody's going at the same time.
I have going back to the insurance issue, I just wanted to mention, the chief mentioned a safer from wildfire set of things. And I just wanted to mention that every insurance company in California has to give you a discount for each one of those actions individually. So if you look at that list, you don't necessarily guarantee that you will be eligible for a new insurer or that you'll keep your insurer, but whatever insurer you're with has to give you a discount for the ember-resistant vents with 5-foot flames. And know to tell your insurer about those. And they can still not renew you, yes. It doesn't affect eligibility, but it does affect your rate. And I've also mentioned there will be somebody from United Policyholders in the window on next Sunday fire preparedness event. We're having at the community park, and we'll be doing a presentation for two of them actually on searching for insurance coverage in today's market. So that person from United Policyholders will like me, and helping people as best they can in this difficult part to find them themselves. That's Sunday in the community park. 10:30 to 1. One Sunday. This
Is there a question for? No, no.
yes, I'm guessing everybody wants to attend that too. That's my question.
So I think sure we're answering. Okay, the gentleman up there. Oh, I got it.
There's a lot of modeling that because we don't want to take their. But I want to go back to the so we have very actual data that could be used in that. Model. What percentage
If I could clarify for a second, though, that you're mixing two bins of data. Human caused fires are specific to vegetative wildland fires. There are no interior compartment structure fires included on that list.
So Looks like a number of people are leaving. We're willing to keep going with questions, or do you want to wrap it up? Maybe like 2 or 3 more and then we'll wrap up.
But I guess I want to still follow up with engage. Internally.
They have plenty of data on the probability of the house burning down because of a kitchen fire or electrical fire. That's why it's not really hard outside of the wildfire area to get insurance, as long as insurance companies are not worried about something else. Like, availability is conditioned on the ability to manage and measure the risk and the ability to charge enough for the risk. The risk of kitchen fires and electrical fires has not increased dramatically in the last 7 years. It has not contributed to 2 times the total profit of the insurance industry over the prior 26 years. There's not been a giant increase in that risk at all. Those are completely different fires than the kind of fires that burn down an entire community, which is what we're mostly trying to focus on.
I would also say just, I disagree with the premise of the original question, which was relative loss or risk of one relative to the other. It's the absolute loss of each independent of the other is what we're responding to now. It is not that there is more risk of interior fire. It is there is risk of interior fire and vegetative fire. And to Nancy's point, the risk of vegetative fire is the new component. The risk of interior fire is steady and declining. We know that, and we've engineered our way out of that space. We need to have an equal engineering effort on the vegetative side, if that makes sense.
And this gentleman's been waiting.
Oh, you're on. It's on, Gordon.
Hi, I'm an important, this is here from, Jewish, and, I'm long for the fire. The volunteer firefighter in West Michigan here. Served as fire commissioner for a number of years, and then was involved in the company to rock the fire one of the things that people need to do is stop avoiding, the excessive cost on because it's cheap insurance if you put weeds out and you cut the trees away from the chimney. You do the things that are recommended and demanded in the fire code. That's cheap insurance because if you get another cancellation, something like that, then you're really in hot water, so to speak. So my really comment, folks, is we should do what is necessary to protect ourselves. And there's a lot of information going around, a lot of studies, which many of us probably don't get all the nuances and all the details. But the one thing that we need to capture is you want to keep your neighborhood safe. So if anybody approaches you about the fire-wise neighborhood, doing the same things that others in the organization, fire districts recommend, then do your best to get it done. It may not have to be done overnight, but do it instead. The last thing I have to say is stay in touch with your insurance agent, broker, or the company itself. You get rid of your gas furnace, for example, and put in a heat pump. Let them know about that. Because they'd like to know there's one less gas appliance in that home here. If you're planning to do some of the things that we're going to do tonight, that you shouldn't do it, when you do that, send it to your agent or broker or company, so that the underwriter can get to review your policy the next coming year, usually it's 90 days or so before your policy is up for renewal. So the underwriter can take a look and say, oh, that needs and so on. Or that's yet, oh, they're a member of a Firewise community. Well, so those are the kinds of things you have to do. It's a people problem. It's not the system. We just have to put up with the system and write about it. But the bottom line is, for our own safety, we gotta do something. And so that's my comment for tonight. And I thank everybody here on the panel, school district and town to open this up to our youth. So thank you very much.
I think it's a good way to wrap. I think it's a good way to wrap up. I think we're running out of steam, but we appreciate your interest in coming out and the town and the fire district, we'd be happy to have more of these type of meetings. I think they're very useful, the Q&A piece. So we're gonna call it a wrap. I do want to thank the fire chief and Nancy Watkins, police chief, and the staff that helped put it on. And most importantly, the school district, the Malaga School District. They're dealing with graduations, but they opened up this facility to us, and it was our superintendent of schools, Dr. Julie Parks, who made the suggestion to use this facility. So we're very grateful. So when you leave, we're gonna stay, and I made the promise that I would return this facility to the condition it was when we started. So please take this, if you have any food or drinks, take it out with you, and please help yourself to whatever goodies are left there. We'll take care of the chairs. Yeah, we'll take care of that. Thank you so much. I hope it was helpful. We welcome your feedback and criticisms as to how we can do it better. Thank you. Good night. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks.